Hi, I'm Danica Tormolen, VP of Content for Trade Show News Network, Corporate Event News, and Exhibit News Now. I'm joined today by Panos Moutafis, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Zenus. And I'm also joined with Oliver Bailey, who heads up interactive design for IMEX Group. We're going to talk today a little bit about what they have planned together coming up for IMEX 2023. So welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
So I'll let you get started, Oliver. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are planning together, and then Panos may jump in and give us some insight into some of the technology behind that.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us here. I was trying to remember if this is the third or fourth outing that we've done together at IMEX shows. Let's say it's the third, it may be the fourth anyway. So we've had a few iterations to experiment, try a few things out. We're still always experimenting and trying new things out because we're always being supplied with new toys to play with and new ways to experiment and do things. This time round, we've actually got quite a few different areas we're looking at. And I will say as well, I'm sure Panos will mention it at some point, but we're not the only people in our show halls using this technology. Other people are as well.
Some of the exhibitors, you mean?
That's right. Yeah, some of the other exhibitors and other people are involved in other things. Main areas that we're focusing on this time around are all the areas really where positive sentiment is our success criteria, really. That's the thing that we really love from this technology, because it's very hard to measure it other than just to stand there observing the whole time. It's very tricky to do when there's a million things going off at once and you've got a cell phone that's going off every few seconds asking you to do something else. So that's why we really like it. So that would mainly include our sponsorships that we have, where people have done a really active sponsorship, where they want people to engage in a way that makes this sense of positivity happen. They're ideal scenarios. We've also got areas that we've designed almost for the opposite of that, to calm people down and give them this little oasis off the show floor, because it can be very hectic and nobody can keep at 100% all the time. Every now and then you have to escape a little bit, just recharge, just settle down. So we want to know if that works, because we invest quite a lot and it's a tricky thing to get right. We also have some education sessions, not all, but we have some specific education sessions, particularly those in the morning that are energizer sessions, where we run them and we want people to be motivated. Maybe it's the second day of the show. People maybe were out the night before, reset them, get them going. They really enjoy that kind of thing as well. And then just generally around our catering areas, for instance, that's another area that we want to make sure things are going well, because we can tell using other technologies kind of how busy they are, but that doesn't give us the full picture, because a very busy area could be a problem if people aren't enjoying themselves. But if people are genuinely positive and upbeat, then it's a great thing, because it means that people are networking and getting together. So that's just a really broad area, really. There's lots of detail within that, and we have lots of conversations about that. Summary then, anywhere that positive sentiment is a success criteria, and anything where that data will help us iterate, or we can use it to add context and value to a client or sponsor.
Wonderful. Panos, tell us a little bit about some of the people who may not be familiar. How do you measure the positive sentiment, and how does that technology, in layman's terms, work?
Yes. So first, to start off, because some people get scared when they understand we're analyzing faces. I want to address this up front. Is there are lots of things you can say from a person's face. Everybody's familiar with face recognition, and they get a little bit scared and worried and so forth. But beyond identity, you can tell many things. So when we detect a face, first of all, we can say someone is there. We say this is a face, this is not a face, this is a switch, a mic, and so forth. This is a human face. There is presence. Are we seeing one face? Are we seeing 50 faces? Do we see them in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night? So that's the first part. You can get an idea about traffic. But beyond that, the moment you detect a face, you can say, are they moving away or are they staying in the area? Something attracts their attention, they stay. How long do they stay? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour in front of the point of interest? Are they men, women, young, old? And last but not least, the positive sentiment that all in a team focus on is when the face is detected, you can analyze the facial expression. Now you just smile, like our faces, not just the mouth, but the eyes, the forehead, the cheeks, our faces, they're pretty expressive and they tell a lot about our experience. So the technology can analyze a face multiple times per second. And the system has been trained in a way to score the positivity of the facial expressions. So for example, surprise might be negative or it might be positive. The ability to distinguish between the two is very important. Excitement, smiles, laughs, anything that surrounds a positive experience has to be measured, quantified, intensity, duration, frequency, and so forth. So the technology is detecting, analyzing faces multiple times per second, scores it, and then we're looking at the aggregate, and that's very important. We don't say, Danica, you're a sad person, you're a happy person, or anything like that. We're just looking at the group level, anonymously. Out of the 5,000 people, we had most of them, they had lots of positive expressions in this location. In the other location, they didn't so much. Is it by design? Because as Ollie mentioned, some areas they're supposed to turn you off. So is this by design or our plan and our intentional, deliberate way of creating the experience maybe didn't work exactly as planned? So that's how it works, and that's how it is being used.
So no privacy issues is basically no concerns from your perspective as the event organizer that you have to worry about infringing on their privacy at all.
Yes, it's something that's on the forefront of our minds. Of course it is. And I wouldn't want anything that was intrusive either. But there's obviously a very important difference between facial analysis in this case and facial recognition, which is something that's quite opposite to this. So facial recognition would be detecting a face and linking that to an actual person or to information about a person. That's not what we're talking about here. Here we're talking anonymously, looking at faces, impressions of faces, and saying that's a happy face, that's a neutral face. That's what we're talking about here, just impressions. So it's entirely anonymous. But of course, we take it seriously. Of course, we have all this information on registration, but I know in the past, I think Panos and I we've talked about sessions during our show where we've given people full transparency of this is how it happens, because I think the thing that's when people ever do get worried, it's always from a place where they don't quite understand the technology, and new technology can be a bit mysterious. That's why it's cool a lot of the time as well. But with that comes worries. It's always great to have conversations whenever there's new exciting technology, but being transparent, I think, is very important for organizers when they're thinking about bringing new technology. And Panos, you've probably got something to say on this as well.
I want to add to it, and in the fear of being promotional, but I think that's an important part for people to understand. The way it's been deployed, not just what it does, that we do not identify, but the way it's been deployed.
What is the setup like?
So we have a very small device like this that we put together. And what this device does, it connects to a sensor, a camera sensor. And the physical environment is converted into statistics instantly. So the video footage, it is not stored on a device, it is not transmitted anywhere. Over the course of 1 hour, there's only 1 megabyte of data being transmitted from the device. When you take a picture, it's usually 9 megabytes, 10 megabytes. That's how small it is, because all the information that can be used to tie data to an individual has been stripped out at the time that it is collected. So in many ways, and that's my opinion, my very biased opinion, but that's my opinion, is that compared to the amount of data we're giving to registration, compared to the amount of data on CCTV and so forth, the impact to privacy is much, much lower. But of course, as Ollie mentioned, when something is new, people are concerned. And our job is to educate them about how it works so that we can alleviate these concerns, or let's give them the option to know how it works.
So you give reports. I'm just want to summarize this for the audience here. So you're going to learn that the data that you collect and you're able to give to the show organizer is going to be some traffic information, impressions, right? And then dwell time and age and demographic information and their overall sentiment.
Correct. Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, let's talk about how you've used some of the data in the past, Oliver. How have you shown it to sponsors? Has it helped you increase sponsorships or make changes on the show floor? What actionable items have you been able to do?
Absolutely. I'm just thinking back to our recent event in Frankfurt, our sister show to IMEX America, IMEX Frankfurt, which was in May. That was a special year for us because we refreshed all our branding. And so we wanted to do a bit of a reveal in the bit where people first walk into the exhibition center there. We decided that was our big reveal place. We used the technology there at the point where they would round a corner and then experience it to give that sort of first impression there. Of course, that only works then if you're contrasting it against a neutral space. So we always set up a baseline. It's usually some seating area somewhere that's not got anything else particularly going on, but then is not also designed to be a particularly quiet area. It's just a neutral space, if you like, or we aggregate all of the other data around to get a kind of average, a baseline there as well. In that instance, we wanted to know if our new branding was well received or if we'd actually surfaced it in a way that was exciting as well. So that was important to us to know that. And I'm pleased to say it did come out quite well. So I don't mind talking about it. We also worked with a sponsor, and they were great because they wanted to go beyond just putting up some static branding, and they wanted to create something more experiential. When we work like IMEX does with a lot of destinations, they always want to bring a bit of their flavor into what they do. So we created an area on the entrance of the hall that it did have some visuals, but it also had sounds, and it also used scent machines. And we really themed the area so that when you were walking through that space, you were clearly in a different environment. And then we used the technology in there because then we were immediately able to contrast this space, another space, and other sponsorships that weren't perhaps as active as well. It's a big investment doing a sponsorship, and I wouldn't be surprised if people feel nervous about it, as we all do in our jobs. But it gives people confidence then if we're able to say, hey, look, it really worked. This was so many points clearer than better received in terms of sentiment than these other things that were happening around, not just sponsorships, but other things. Equally, though, as people get more familiar with this kind of thing, then it will allow them to iterate. Maybe some aspect doesn't quite go as well, or the score isn't as expected. Then we can look at other areas, other data, and think, why was that? What could we do better next time? So it's about helping people to improve. That's really what it's all about. And we used it also on our catering areas as well, because we wanted to make sure that the people who were using those public areas, that the sentiment wasn't anywhere shorter than the people that were in our VIP areas, because we want everybody to have a good positive experience when they take a break, as our VIPs do. So we try out lots of different things, really. But as I said at the start, sponsorships really and our own feature areas are really our key concerns there.
I want to add a couple of things. So Ollie and the team, what they do really is they have the mindset of experimentation, of doing A/B testing within the show. So Ollie mentioned it a couple of times about putting a baseline. And that's very important to say, okay, this is my baseline. This is what I'm testing. How does it compare to it? But even if you look beyond that, because once you start doing multiple shows, you can start comparing one show to the next and the next, or one show with all the other shows. You can start seeing where you rank, and then that gives you a true baseline of how much effort you have to put or not. And IMEX, just to do a shout out, they're always scoring really, really high. It's a top performer. And a lot of the times when people ask us, what should we do better? I'm saying, look at IMEX and have somebody like Ollie that is very intentional about design, the experience, the whole team and culture has to be about that in order to make differences. And the last part is that when somebody starts using something, and then somebody else sees it and they like it and they add it and it starts growing. In the upcoming show at IMEX Las Vegas, Americas in Las Vegas. So what we are seeing is we had multiple, like many of the sponsors and exhibitors asking us to use the technology, like all the big names you might know, they will be using the technology. And we talked with Ollie and the team and we said, you know what, can we create a data pool of sharing the information between everyone using the technology? And that's what we're going to do. So everybody's pulling the data and everybody is able to access more of the data. And this creates better insights for everyone. And we're really working in a way that creates win situations for everyone without having, it's not a zero-sum mentality. I have data, you don't have data. I have insights, you don't. It's an approach and culture of sharing, and we'll all get better together.
Can you give us an idea of how many exhibitors that you're also working with at IMEX, approximate?
I don't know at this point. I don't know how many devices we're going to have total, and we're talking about several dozen devices, maybe 60, 90. I haven't checked the last number, and I apologize at this time. I don't have all the numbers. Our team is working on that.
Yeah.
There's a few key partners that I know that we're working with as well that I know are in touch with you as well as people like Encore and Google for their XI projects and things like that, where they're very much plugged into the world of experience design. And we're constantly working together on projects like that.
AFA, all the people, the furniture rental, like all the companies that working with Google XI, I think Hello DMC and so forth, but I don't know all the numbers, all the names.
Yeah, I know. We're still a few weeks out, so I'm sure that there could be more coming up. Oliver, do you then give reports to the sponsors afterwards, sit down with your teams? Is that on site or post show? Do you make any changes on the fly while you're there?
Several good questions there. So for the sponsors, we haven't universally done it because, like I said, we only use it for areas that we know where there's measurable positive sentiment. There's some sponsorship that might be wonderful, but it might not be designed specifically to elicit that kind of a response. It might not be that active. It might be very thoughtful and successful in that way, but you're not going to be able to tell from facial expression alone how successful it was. So maybe not appropriate in those cases, but in cases where they want people to engage and have fun, brilliant, that's what we want to use it for. Because it's quite new, we haven't factored it into our sales process or anything like that. It's just a bonus. But what we've done is take things from the Zenus environment and create our own little summary report, really. And then we played that back in person. And quite often, we don't really know what the insights are. They know their clients and their target demographics and things like that better than we do. And so we just play it back and we are able then also to show them other areas and how it compares. So it's been done very in person and conversationally. I think that sort of helps. And at the end, we'll give them whatever material I was referring to. But we're still developing it now. It's still quite new for us. So it's something that we want to get right. And during these conversations, through the questions that we're asked, we know how better to do things next time. At the moment, it's been very consultative, but maybe in the future, we'll formalize that and make it a little bit more standard. Whether we've changed things on the fly is a very good question. No, we haven't yet, but I want to get to the stage where we can do that. So it's a question of giving ourselves, I think, the bandwidth to be able to use this data within our own observations included in that so that we can use it to act. But it's a question of rolling it out in a more meaningful way and plugging it into our own processes and our other technologies as well. Like I said about areas being busy, are they good busy or bad busy? Queues, things like that, queue management, other areas. So at the moment, we've been looking at pretty much after the fact, mostly. But I want to start using it in the moment because why not? Because we're in a live environment. It's live data. We can access it live. It'd be crazy not to. So that's where we'll try and get to in the future.
So on the live interventions, so I don't know, Danica or Rolly, you were at CISO last summer in Salt Lake City, but Clarion and Freeman, they did a presentation the last day of the show, and it was about the FDIC deployment by Clarion last spring. And the funny thing is they're using our technology, and sometimes I don't know how the data is being used either. So I was attending the session in the audience. And what they mentioned on stage was they were using the data and they had a team of analysts monitoring remotely, by Freeman. And they identified a few sponsors that the amount of traffic, interactions, and leads conversions were getting was low. So they were able to go and change things out. And the second day, they end up getting 66% more leads. And this is where having the data at the end of the day, and being able to go to your sponsors, your exhibitors, and have a conversation, not just, hey, how's it going? Is the good show this year? But being able to go with some more data and having the consultative approach that Ollie mentioned and make changes or explain certain things, it changes the conversation quite a bit.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about setup, what that all entails, and then a little bit about costs, if you don't mind.
Let's talk about our process, if you like, the way we work together on that sort of thing. From our side, we started using this technology in the first place so that we could be more strategic when it came to event design, particularly experience design, because when you want to measure success there, you're going beyond numbers, you're getting into the qualitative measurements. is it going down? How are people feeling? That kind of thing. It's really tricky to measure unless you've got boots on the ground, just people just staring at people and watching, you know, all the time, which, you know, is great. And we do, of course, we do that because we want to corroborate everything with real in-person feelings ourselves, but we can't be there all the time. We were looking for technologies to be able to do that. We always return to what do we want to know this year? Either what gaps do we have in our field of vision at the moment that we want to fill, or what new things are we trying out? What do we want to measure to be sure that it's working? New things in particular. So we start off with some hypotheses, and then we have several conversations with Zenus about the best way to deploy with all of that. Sometimes during these conversations, they might be working on something else that's new, or there's a new feature and we think, oh, that's great, let's try that out as well. And then based on that, we get technical and we start saying, if you want to do that, this would be the best place to position a camera. And they are minuscule, right? Nobody ever sees them, which is the point, but where they see them. And then we get round to the very boring bit of ordering electrical connections and that kind of thing. So we first of all start with what do we want to achieve, and then we go through the how we're going to do it.
So, because you asked about the pricing, I think that's my cue. but talking a little bit about the installation piece, many of the companies we work with, or the organizers, associations, and so forth, they have tried to use technologies like RFID, beacons, and so forth. And one of the challenges, putting accuracy aside, sometimes the installation can be a little bit complicated, the rollout can be a little bit complicated. And the one thing that I think it's quite easy with these technologies, you don't need internet because you can work out of 4G, the device, you don't have to run cables, you just need access to power. And the setup process takes on average 12 to 15 minutes per device. It's very easy to do. That's the first part. And when it comes to cost, I will reference again the session I mentioned previously with Ken Holsinger and Lauren Comat CISO, where it was said on stage that when you wanted to do even a simple test with RFID, the cost was easily 100K plus. And the reason is it was that high is, again, infrastructure, installation, the sensors, it has a lot of logistics. Whereas these technologies, it's plug and play. It has a much lower impact. So to do a big show like IMEX with very good coverage, it might be 35K, it might be 50K. It's less than half for full coverage versus a test with RFID, which can be twice or 4 times that. So the price point is usually right for being able to test, experiment. And then the ease of use, the privacy components. So we have tried to work on many of these things. But the one thing I want to call out is limitations, because it is not a silver bullet, and we have to be very upfront about that. You can't say, oh, I use Zenus, I don't have to do anything else. No, like Ollie mentioned, you have to be on site, see in person the context why something's happening, use a survey, give people the opportunity to give their feedback, because some things you might not get in terms of context.
It's one data point, or it's
exactly.
Several
a piece
data
of the puzzle.
points.
It's a piece of the puzzle. The registration data, like the leads captured, you have to have the full picture. So this is one of the pieces.
Yeah, in fact, we've started incorporating Zenus data along with our post-show survey data as well, just to exactly do that, so that when people post-show are giving some feedback, positive or negative, about a certain thing, we can then refer to this data that was captured in the moment. And we could say, actually, yes, the data does support this. We need to do something about that, or let's do that again twice as big. Or we could say, that's strange because people seem to be remembering it one way where actually perhaps it was another way. So maybe next year we need to focus on more in-person observations there, get in amongst it a little bit more and experience it for ourselves, see what's going on. But as Panos said, it's a very valuable tool, but it isn't a tool that you can use for every single purpose. No tool is. Yeah.
I've been to the show for the last couple of years and I haven't noticed any of the equipment at all. Okay, so you were talking about where there's gaps and looking at some of the new things. So what is your overall goal for this year that you were trying to accomplish with this project?
There's an old saying that if it's measured, it's managed, right? So the opposite of that is also true. So if you're not measuring something, you can't be expected to manage it effectively. For years, we've been creating features like lounges, people to take a break and things like that. We know that they're well used and we know that they're important features. But then if we want to take those to the next level and be more effective about them, how do we know? We're talking tiny increments then of change. We have to find different ways of measuring that. And of course, personal observation is still very important, but it's not always great in its own right as well, because people get tired along 3 days. And if you're observing at different times, that introduces statistical confounds as well, because I might be really tired on day 2, really energized on day 1, and my observations may suffer or may be different as a result. An AI doesn't get fatigued and doesn't have biases or anything like that. So those observations are very consistent throughout. So they help with those kind of things. There's no overall goal other than to get more data and really use that a bit more. So we're able to take an evidence-based approach to design, which is what we want to do. And a lot of the time, we're not far off. We've been doing something for years and we've never measured it before. The measurement might just reaffirm our good decisions that we've made in the past, which is great. It's great to have that validation. And it might not always change everything. It might not always lead to dollars or anything like that, but at least we'll know we're on the right track. When we bring in anything new, that's always a chance to do something with measurement for sure.
But what's one new thing you're going to measure this year? One new feature?
Our whole education space has been really redesigned this time around. The content, we haven't drastically changed the way that we deliver content, but the actual space that it takes place in is all going to be new. So we're looking at that area. The partnership with Google, they're creating a resilience room, which is specifically designed to meet neurodiversity needs. So it's not just, it's a step beyond what we have, say, in the hosted bio lounge, which is just a relaxation space. This space is designed for people that really need to get away in different kind of ways. So that's a very interesting thing for us to try and measure, because that's totally new to us. And there's lots of different ways, different tools that we're using along that side as well. But then just generally our catering areas, things like that, just to we're still picking up our baseline for our shows. This is only the second iteration for IMEX America. So we're only comparing it to last year. Was last year a fair? I don't know. The shows are just, I think, now getting to where they should have been had we hadn't had a few years out. I think we're still establishing that baseline and that way of using things. Obviously, for the sponsors as well, we want them to realize that they can, when they sponsor with us, they're not just getting exposure, they can get insights as well. So trying, I think, to create that data culture around live events, to show people that live events are actually superior to the digital world in many ways, because you can get the same kind of metrics from live events now using this kind of data and others, but you're there in person as well. You're getting that immediate connection. I guess that's what we're trying to do, is just take our events to the next level and bring other people along for the ride with us.
Better experience all around for attendees in everything
Absolutely.
that you do. Yeah.
That's the whole goal. Yeah, that is the goal around it, a better experience. Of course it is.
Yeah. You made a good point, which I should clarify. So when you get the reports, are you measuring each area the whole entire time? And then you can see the sentiment by et cetera.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So it's measured over time. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important if you're, there are some sessions, let's say if they're like sales conferences, things like that, or conferences, we're an exhibition first, but we have conference elements there. A conference first, they would want to measure their speaker's performance, especially if it's a motivational speaker. Because if they start off really energized and then they can see that it goes downhill afterwards, or it goes downhill for a different demographic, perhaps, then that's something that they might want to look at in detail and address for the future. And we're not so focused on the conference side of things, of course, but for other organizers, that could be very key for them.
Yeah. Panos, do you want to add something?
To address the question from a technical point of view, the data is coming through every 30 seconds. The interface updates every 5 minutes, so it's very real time. And as Oli alluded to, you can analyze the minute-by-minute changes in the audience. To illustrate the effectiveness of the technology and the experience design, Nick Borelli, our marketing director, with Ann Wen, they offered a session at EduCon in the summer. And what they did, they had designed a journey, an emotional journey, where in the beginning, they were getting people in, relaxing them, making them feel comfortable. Then they were scaring them, saying, oh, privacy, data, surveillance, and so forth. And you would see the sentiment drop. And then they would explain how the technology works and starts pulling up. And then they would show the data to the audience where they were presenting in real time and say, hey, look, we nudged you in one direction and then in a different direction and in the next direction, because we want to show you we can create a mapping of the experience during a session, because that's what content is supposed to do. It's supposed to move you emotionally. And this happened 4 or 5 times, and they were able to show that. And Nick will be doing that again at IMEX America. And that's a very interesting thing to see, because intuitively we can sit here and discuss all the time, but when you experience it in the audience and then you see that it works in this way, it's a very different thing.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing on site to show, you're speaking at a couple of sessions. Is that right?
That is correct. We're doing this, I believe, as part of the Google XI project, and we're doing it with an agency out of Austin as well. I think it's called Hoyt, Jeff and Alyssa. And it is focused on education. For us, the most important thing is educating people on how it works. For some people, it is a good fit, they will use it. Some people, it is not a good fit, they will not use it. So all of the content we're trying to do is focusing on education, and then the market will decide on its own. So we will be doing that. We will be having a booth as well, because, by the way, this is how the relationship started. We were interested in exhibiting at IMEX to showcase our technology and product. And the team saw what we do, and we got connected, and we started working together. They introduced us to Ollie, which is very interesting. But we will have a pretty strong presence across the floor, from some sessions, content, our partnerships, which is very important to us, our partners. Because again, our mentality is not zero sum. We win, somebody else loses. We want everybody to have access to technology and data and lift everyone up. So lots of different things: JRPG, Encore, Google, AFR, lots of different things with lots of different companies at IMEX, and obviously IMEX itself.
So that's how you decided to use their technology. You met through exhibiting on the show floor, and then...
Yeah, these planets aligned a little bit, really. As I said, I was trying to think of different ways to get more strategic about experience design. Without knowing, Panos was talking to one of my colleagues about exhibiting, but also met a mutual friend who then introduced us. So it was a kind of a three-pronged attack. It was obviously meant to be. Anyway, it worked out very well.
Great. I want to ask you both one final question. Do you have any advice for other event organizers who might be considering using this type of technology and trying to gather data about their experience design? What advice do you have, and what's been like the biggest benefit to you?
The advice, I suppose, is if you are planning on going to IMEX America, then do seek one of us out in person and have a conversation about it. If you're not, then sign up and go then. It's a great opportunity to see it. Other advice would be just stop and have a think about all the things that you're doing and how you can be more strategic about making them better in the future. And I think when you stop and do that and maybe think, how do I want this thing to be in 3 years from now, or how do I know it's doing what it's supposed to be doing? If you've got some questions you can't answer with that, have a think about what sort of technology that could be out there that could do that. And you may find that you're answering some of those questions by saying facial analysis software could perhaps help us with that. That's the journey that I went on anyway. And then it was a question of experimenting, trying it out, and seeing for ourselves really what the results were. And every time we have one of these conversations, whether it's like now in the middle of a recording or whether it's a side conversation we're having, there's other ideas that come out of it as well. So once you start the ball rolling, then it'll lead you to some very interesting places. But just get in there and experiment. I think that's my main point.
Excellent. And Panos, what about you from your side? What's some advice for somebody who hasn't ever done this and use this kind of technology?
So I would say something along the same lines as Ollie, that you have to have intention, you have to be intentional, deliberate about trying, experimenting, and letting the data guide you. That's very important. So we had one of the Fortune 50 companies working with us as the exhibitor, and they came and they said, what they told us is, tell us the truth straight up, don't hide anything, just tell us what the data is saying. And they listened, and then they were able to increase the number of demos offered by 300% on the same booth size, which is insane. So you have to listen to the data. On the flip side, if you just say, oh, this looks cool, let me try the new fancy thing, that will not create an ROI. Don't do it. It is not a good use of our time or their time, of anybody's time. You have to be very intentional about, hey, I want to measure this thing, and then I'm going to learn something, or I'm going to do something. You either learn or you do something, sometimes both. But unless you're intentional about how you're using the tool, like every tool, you will not get the benefit out of it. So if you have data analysts, they can use the data. If not, you can use our data analysts, you can use Freeman, MDG, like whatever company, but you have to be intentional about it. You have to have a direction. Otherwise, again, like with every tool, you will not get the ROI.
And some of the most valuable data that you're going to get would be if it exposes something that you're not doing right. Even if you're working with a sponsor and it didn't work for them, if you're able to say, look, you're on the wrong track here, that could be incredibly beneficial for them for the future, that they could change direction then and put things right. Some of the times the best thing is when you're being shown that you're not on the right track. So don't expect it just to be used, just to make everything wonderful, is what I'm saying, because the best case scenario is when it exposes a weakness if you're on the wrong track.
Did you
So
make any?
We call this space for improvement. The marketing way of saying it is space for improvement.
Yeah, exactly. There's continuous improvement all the time. Was there anything that you quit doing from last time to this time based on that data? No,
not from last time to this time. Okay. Let me try and think. One thing that we perhaps have done is expand some of our catering and seating areas because where we saw that the capacity need, which we verified with our own observations. But again, having that, being able to see over time, it's not just the spike at lunchtime. Actually, we could have done with some more area at another time as well. That was a really useful thing. And then in terms of other things, I'm not sure. I'd have to have a think about that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's good to know when you should expand certain areas that are having a lot of traffic.
Very
Again,
true.
That's the experience, improving that experience for your attendee. So thank you both so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to see everything at IMEX, and maybe we can check in 6 months right after the show and you can tell me what you learned from the reports.
Love to. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you both.